Right before we dive into the first hidden habit, pause for a second. If you're curious about why Japanese people can eat so well and stay this lean, hit subscribe now so you don't miss the rest of this series on Japanese lifestyle, longevity, and everyday habits. It's free, it takes 1 second, and it tells YouTube to keep showing you content that actually makes you healthier. While many countries are losing the battle against the scale, Japan almost looks like it lives in a different reality. In much of the West, oversized portions, ultra-processed foods, and sedentary routines push obesity rates up, yet Japan stays among the leanest nations, even with a cuisine full of delicious, visually rich dishes. This contrast creates what many call the Japanese paradox. How can people eat so well and still stay slim? The answer is not a magic food, but a collection of quiet habits repeated every single day. Instead of jumping from one trendy diet to another, Japanese food culture rests on tradition, rhythm, and consistent choices. From how the plate is arranged to the pace of chewing and the respect for meal times. Over this video, it becomes clear that it is less about eating dramatically less and more about eating in a completely different way. Another key point is that Japan values not only what is on the plate, but the whole experience around eating. Meals are often treated as moments of attention, aesthetics, and gratitude, not just a quick refuel between tasks. That attitude changes how much people eat, how fast they eat, and how often they overdo it. The most important part is that many of these habits can be copied anywhere in the world. You do not need to live in Tokyo to benefit from this silent system of staying lean, and later in the video, one specific habit, almost never talked about, appears right in the middle as a turning point for anyone who is tired of fighting against food. One of the first things you notice in a traditional Japanese meal is the portion size. Instead of one huge plate, you see several small dishes, each holding a modest amount of food, which together create a meal that looks abundant and varied. Visually, the table says plenty, even if the total calories are far lower than a single Western-style overloaded plate. This design works directly with how the brain and stomach talk to each other. Smaller portions, combined with more textures, colors, and flavors, naturally slow down the meal and give your brain time to recognize fullness before you overshoot. It's like the meal is engineered to make stopping at the right time feel natural instead of forced. Culturally, piling food to the edge of the plate is not the standard of generosity in Japan. Balance, empty space, and harmony on the table matter a lot, which makes restrained portions feel normal, not like punishment or scarcity. Eating less becomes part of the aesthetic and the etiquette, not a painful sacrifice. This is a powerful trick you can borrow without changing what you eat at all. Break one big serving into several smaller bowls or plates and arrange them with intention. As the video continues, you will see how this idea of portion psychology connects with another Japanese habit that quietly nudges you away from overeating without counting a single calorie. One of the most fascinating concepts in Japanese eating culture is Hara Hachi Bu, which means eat until you are about 80% full. Instead of leaving the table stuffed, the goal is to stop while you still feel light and comfortable. This tiny gap between satisfied and overfilled is where a lot of long-term weight control happens. From a physiological point of view, this makes perfect sense. The body needs time to register that enough food has arrived, so people who eat until they feel absolutely full usually pass that point several minutes earlier. Hara Hachi Bu builds a safety margin into every meal, reducing daily calorie excess in a way that feels calm and sustainable instead of extreme. There's also a cultural layer to this principle. It is tied to ideas of self-control, respect for the body, and avoidance of waste, which are taught and reinforced socially. Eating until you can barely move is not admired. Moderation and elegance at the table are. Over a lifetime, that attitude quietly shapes body weight and health.
You do not need to use the Japanese phrase, but you can copy the practice. Stand up from the table feeling good and light instead of heavy and done. Later in the video, when you see how plate design, portion size, and meal rhythm interact, this invisible rule will suddenly click into place as one of the main reasons why Japanese people can enjoy food without sliding into constant weight gain. Look at a classic Japanese table, and it is almost like looking at a painting. There are greens from vegetables, orange and pink from fish, deep browns from seaweed and soy, creamy tones from tofu, plus soups and pickles adding more layers. This isn't just pretty, it is a clever way to pack more nutrients and volume into fewer calories. Color usually signals different nutrients and plant compounds, so a colorful plate tends to mean more fiber, vitamins, and protective substances, and less empty energy. Vegetables, seaweeds, and light soups take up physical space in your stomach, stretch it gently, and trigger fullness signals, all while contributing very little to the total calorie count. On top of that, Japanese meals often balance raw and cooked, crunchy and soft, hot and cold, mild and strong flavors. This diversity stimulates your senses and makes it easier to feel satisfied without oversized amounts of any single item. Instead of one star dominating the dish, several elements share the spotlight in harmony. If you want to borrow this principle, start by asking a simple question every time you build a plate. How many colors and textures can I fit here? As the video progresses and fermented foods and specific preparations appear, you will notice that this visual choreography is not decoration. It is a subtle weight management tool that works meal after meal. At first glance, it sounds contradictory. How can a country that eats rice almost every day stay so lean? In many diet conversations, white rice is treated as a villain, but in the Japanese context, it behaves more like a neutral base, supporting moderate portions of fish or meat, plenty of vegetables, and often a soup on the side. The problem was never rice alone, but what comes with it and in what quantity. In a typical Japanese meal, rice sits beside generous amounts of low-calorie, high-volume foods like vegetables, seaweed, and broths. This keeps total calories under control while still providing satiety and energy. Especially when the rest of the plate is light and minimally processed, rice becomes one piece of a balanced puzzle instead of a runaway source of surplus calories. Another crucial difference is the lower presence of ultra-processed foods and sugary drinks in traditional settings. Without sodas, oversized desserts, and constant snacking layered on top of meals, daily carbohydrate intake looks very different from that of a heavily westernized pattern. Add in small portions and something close to Hara Hachi Bu, and rice loses much of its scary reputation. That is one of the biggest hidden lessons of Japanese eating. Obsessing over a single ingredient rarely solves the problem. What matters is the whole system: how often you eat, how much you move, how the plate is built, how fast you chew, and when you decide to stop. As later sections of the video introduce topics like smart frying, fermented foods, and movement built into daily life, you will see how rice fits calmly into a broader pattern that keeps weight in check without food fear. From the outside, Japanese fried food like tempura looks like a guaranteed path to weight gain, but the way it is prepared and eaten makes a big difference. Portions tend to be smaller, the batter is thin, and the oil is kept at the right temperature so the food absorbs less fat instead of turning into a greasy sponge. Fried dishes also rarely dominate the entire meal. They're just one element among many lighter sides like salad, pickles, and soup. Another important detail is frequency. In a traditional Japanese-style pattern, deep-fried food is not an everyday centerpiece, but more of an occasional highlight. When it does appear, it is often accompanied by grated daikon, green tea, or other elements that keep the overall meal feeling light rather than heavy. So it is not no fried food ever, but fried food used with precision. This approach helps people enjoy richer textures and flavors without normalizing them as the default at every single lunch and dinner. Instead of craving a huge bucket of fried food, the palate gets used to balance and contrast. Crisp next to fresh, hot next to cool, rich next to mild. That habit alone quietly limits how many calories come from frying across the week. The real lesson here is that technique and context matter as much as the ingredient. When frying is done well, in small amounts, inside a meal built around vegetables, rice, and lean protein, it becomes a pleasure you can keep in your life without sabotaging your body. Later in the video, when movement and lifestyle enter a bit more, this smart indulgence side of Japanese eating will fit right into the bigger picture.
If you're finding this silent side of Japanese eating fascinating, especially the role of the gut, you're going to love the video where we break down Japanese morning routines and how they prime your metabolism for the entire day. When you finish this one, check out that video next to see how their first hour after waking quietly supports everything you've just learned about food. If you open a Japanese fridge, you will often find foods quietly alive with beneficial bacteria. Miso, natto, pickles, soy sauce, sometimes yogurt, and more. Fermented foods are woven into daily meals, not treated as exotic supplements. These tiny organisms help the gut work better, support digestion, and may influence how the body handles energy and fat storage over time. A balanced gut microbiome is linked in many studies to better metabolic health, lower inflammation, and a more stable body weight. When a culture eats small amounts of fermented foods every day, mixed into soups, sauces, side dishes, and breakfast items, it is like constantly seeding the gut with helpful allies instead of leaving it to fight alone. The effect is subtle meal by meal, but big across years. Fermented foods also bring strong flavors, salty, tangy, umami-rich, that make it easier to feel satisfied with smaller portions of everything else. A spoonful of miso or a small serving of pickles can transform a simple bowl of rice and vegetables into something deeply comforting, without adding huge amounts of calories. Flavor density replaces calorie density. This is one of those habits that works silently in the background. People are not eating miso soup thinking, this will optimize my microbiome. It is simply tradition. But for someone watching this video and wanting results, adding a small daily fermented item can be a practical experiment that nudges metabolism and appetite in a better direction over time. In many Japanese settings, a meal is not something you rush through standing up with your phone in hand. There is a beginning, often with a phrase of gratitude. There is attention to how the food looks, and there is a natural rhythm of chopsticks, conversation, and pauses. All of this slows down the pace of eating without anyone needing a timer or an app. Slow eating gives your body time to send fullness signals and reduces the chances of overshooting into that uncomfortable "I went too far" zone. It also makes each bite more satisfying, so you do not need as many bites to feel that the meal was worthwhile. The simple act of chewing more, putting chopsticks down between mouthfuls, and noticing textures ends up being a kind of built-in brake on overeating. There is also a cultural pressure away from aggressive behavior at the table. Shoveling food quickly, making the meal look like a race, or constantly multitasking while eating is generally discouraged. Even when life is busy, there are invisible expectations about basic table manners that in practice push people toward a calmer, more mindful style of eating. For you, this can be translated into one simple practice. Treat at least one meal per day as a mini ritual. Sit down, remove distractions for a few minutes, breathe, and actually pay attention to your food. You will notice that just changing the speed and awareness of a meal can already feel more Japanese in the way it protects you from mindless excess. The Japanese bentō is much more than a lunchbox. It is a philosophy in a container. From childhood, many people grow up with neatly arranged meals divided into small compartments, a bit of rice, some protein, colorful vegetables, maybe a small treat. Visually, it is appealing and balanced, and nutritionally, It prevents one single food from overwhelming the entire meal. This compartmentalization naturally trains portion control. Each slot has a limit, and the person preparing the bentō, whether a parent, partner, or the person themselves, usually thinks about color, variety, and nutrition when filling it. Instead of stuffing the box only with the cheapest, heaviest option, there is a cultural expectation that it should be complete and harmonious. There is also an emotional and social layer. A carefully made bentō carries care, identity, and pride. That makes people more likely to actually eat what is inside rather than skipping meals or replacing them with random junk food. Over years, this routine creates a stable backbone for daily nutrition, especially for students and workers who spend long hours away from home.
Borrowing this idea does not require perfect Japanese ingredients. You can simply adopt the rule that your lunchbox or plate must have multiple small sections. One for protein, one for vegetables, one for a staple like rice or another grain, and maybe a small space for something fun. When this pattern becomes automatic, it gets much harder to build the kind of chaotic, ultra-dense meals that slowly push weight upward. Another quiet advantage in Japan is how much movement is built into everyday routines. Walking to stations, climbing stairs, standing on trains, commuting by bike, and exploring cities on foot are all normal parts of life. Even people who never set foot in a gym often accumulate a surprising number of steps simply by getting through the day. This background activity raises total energy expenditure without feeling like exercise. Instead of one intense workout trying to compensate for hours of sitting, there is a steady drip of light movement from morning to night. Over months and years, that difference in daily energy burn adds up, especially when paired with the eating patterns you have seen so far. Urban design, public transportation, and cultural norms all contribute. Car-centered habits are less dominant in many areas, and walking is seen as acceptable or even desirable, not as something only done by those who cannot afford other options. Social expectations also favor punctuality and responsibility, which often means people simply move more to get where they need to be on time. For someone watching this video far from Japan, the takeaway is to stop seeing movement only as gym sessions. Start asking, where can I add short walks, stairs, standing breaks, and light activity into things I already do? That is much closer to the Japanese pattern, and it is that pattern, combined with everything on the plate, that quietly keeps body weight from drifting upward. In Japan, there is a strong sense of not wanting to cause trouble or stand out in a negative way. This value of blending in and showing self-control can indirectly influence body weight. When uniforms, company culture, or social circles subtly favor a neat, disciplined appearance, people may feel more motivated to keep their bodies within a certain range. Health checks at schools and workplaces, public weighing in some contexts, and regular medical screenings also play a role. They bring weight and basic health markers into the open more often than in many countries, which can prompt earlier behavior changes. It is not always comfortable, but it does provide frequent feedback loops between lifestyle and physical condition. Of course, this kind of social pressure has downsides too, including stigma and anxiety for some people. But from a purely behavioral perspective, living in a society where overeating and inactivity are less normalized creates a different default. Many individuals end up steering closer to moderation simply because that is what seems expected and normal. For you, the lesson is not to copy the pressure, but to copy the structure. Find or create environments, online or offline, where balanced eating and regular movement are the norm, not the exception. When the group's center of gravity leans toward health, it becomes much easier to follow along without constant willpower battles. At this point, the mystery of how Japanese people eat so well and stay relatively slim is less mysterious and more like a system with many small gears. There are smaller portions that look abundant,
colorful plates full of vegetables, the invisible rule of stopping before full, frequent fermented foods, smart use of frying, slower meals, structured lunchboxes, built-in movement, and a culture that rewards self-control. The crucial point is that none of these habits requires Japanese genes or a Japanese address. You can start by changing how you plate food, adding one fermented item a day, practicing an 80% full rule, or turning one meal into a daily ritual of slow, focused eating. You can tweak your commute or your breaks to add a bit more walking and standing. And you can design your own bentō logic even with completely local ingredients. You do not need to copy everything at once. Japanese culture itself did not appear overnight. It is the result of countless small decisions repeated over generations. Choose one or two of these habits to test for a few weeks and pay attention to how your appetite, energy, and weight respond. The real secret of the Japanese way is not a miracle food. It's the quiet power of consistent, well-designed habits working together over time. If this video helped you see Japanese habits in a new way, do 3 quick things for yourself and for the channel.
Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into Japanese daily life. Like this video so the algorithm knows this topic matters. Share it with someone who's always on a diet but has never seen how a whole culture stays slim without obsessing over calories. That tiny bit of support lets us keep bringing you more science-backed Japanese habits that you can actually use in real life.